What if I told you the NFL has games it hopes you never remember? Not because of scandal, but because they were so bad, so boring, or so embarrassing, they're almost impossible to rewatch. From quarterbacks running into linemen, to playoff meltdowns, to stadiums full of clowns. These are the moments the league quietly buries. No replays, no highlights, just awkward silence. Today, we're going through every NFL game the league wants you to forget. And trust me, some of these are legendary in the worst way. Stick around, because it only gets uglier from here. The Fog, Bowl 2.0, 2009 Jets versus Buccaneers. Some games are legendary for all the wrong reasons. And then there are games where nothing happens. Games that feel like football called in sick. That's what Jets versus Bucks in Week 14 of 2009 delivered. A 16-3 coma of a game that only lives on because the internet won't forget. The matchup was already rough. The New York Jets, led by rookie Mark Sanchez, were 6-6. The Buccaneers, 1-11, started Josh Freeman, who was learning how brutal the NFL could be. Add cold weather, rain, and swirling Florida wind, and you had the perfect storm for. Sanchez was injured, so the Jets started Kellen Clemens, who managed just 6 total passing yards in the first half. Freeman wasn't much better. He threw 3 interceptions, including 2 that looked like practice drills gone wrong. It wasn't just bad, it was painful. Neither team cracked 250 total yards. There were 7 turnovers, endless 3-and-outs, and 0 memorable plays. Fans were booing by the second quarter. By the fourth, you could hear players talking on the broadcast. A Reddit comment at the time nailed it. This feels like a punishment. I didn't know you could be bored and stressed watching football. The Jets won 26-3, but no one cared. Clemens said he was just glad it's over. Honestly, same. This wasn't a scandal or blooper reel, just a lifeless game that the NFL quietly buried. You won't find it in highlight packages. Even Jets fans can't remember who scored. And if that was painful, imagine needing one win to make the playoffs. And getting beat by a team whose fans came dressed as clowns. The Clown Out Game. 2021 Jaguars versus Colts. The 2021 Colts controlled their own destiny. Beat the 2-14 Jaguars, and they're in the playoffs. Simple, right? Wrong. Jaguars fans showed up in clown costumes, protesting team owner Shad Kane. Meanwhile, the Colts, coming off a mid-season surge behind Jonathan Taylor and Darius Leonard, just needed a stable day from Carson Wentz. What they got was one of the most shocking meltdowns in NFL history. Wentz was sacked 6 times, threw an interception, lost a fumble, and finished with a QBR of 4.4. Taylor was bottled up. The Colts never led. On the other side, Trevor Lawrence, after a rocky rookie year, played like a franchise QB, hitting throws, extending drives, and leading Jacksonville to a 26-11 win. The stadium was half full, half clown. One fan held a sign, "We're a circus, but you're the punchline." After the game, Wentz looked shell-shocked. Head coach Frank Reich aged 5 years in one post-game presser. Wentz was traded a week later. The Colts haven't recovered since. The NFL doesn't want to remember this one because it wasn't just a loss. It was a total faceplant. No injuries, no excuses. Just a team, folding under pressure, in front of a fan base dressed like jokers. And if you think that's brutal, wait until the referees become the story. Up next, a game so broken it ended a labor dispute, and gave us the infamous Fail Mary Monday night meltdown. 2012 Seahawks versus Packers. September 24th, 2012. Monday Night Football. Seahawks versus Packers. 2 tough defenses, 1 national spotlight, and replacement refs. With the NFL's regular officials on strike, unqualified replacements were on the field, and it showed. Missed calls, confusion, chaos. But the final play made this game unforgettable. Down 12-7, rookie Russell Wilson heaved a Hail Mary to Golden Tate. Packers DBMD Jennings came down with the ball, clear interception, but Tate wrestled for it midair. One ref signaled touchdown, the other interception. Bedlam. Players screamed. Fans booed. Mike Tirico on ESPN said, "I don't know what to say." Twitter exploded. Aaron Rodgers tweeted simply, "Come on, man." Final. Seahawks 14. Packers 12. But no one bought it. 2 days later, the NFL ended the lockout. The league would rather erase this moment. It proved their worst fear. Bad officiating breaks the entire game. Even Seahawks fans looked uncomfortable winning like that. And if you thought officiating was bad here, up next is a game that didn't need refs to fall apart. Just mud, rain, and two teams completely unable to score. The legendary 3-0 slopfest in Pittsburgh, the Slog Bowl, 2007 Steelers versus Dolphins. You know a football game is bad when the only touchdown doesn't exist, and the punter is the MVP. Welcome to November 26th, 2007. A night game between the Pittsburgh Steelers and Miami Dolphins that the NFL would love to delete from its archives. Officially, it ended 3-0. Unofficially, it never really started. The setup was a classic Monday Night Football spotlight game, but the conditions were anything but prime time. Heinz Field had just hosted 3 high school playoff games and a University of Pittsburgh game in the span of 72 hours. The turf, completely ruined. Then came the rain, then more rain. By kickoff, it was a full-blown mud bowl. Players were literally slipping during warm-ups. Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin called it unplayable, but the game went on anyway. From the first snap, it was clear. This wasn't football. It was trench warfare in a swamp. There were 21 combined punts, no red zone visits until the final 2 minutes, and about 60 yards of real passing in the first half. Ben Roethlisberger couldn't plant his feet. John Beck, starting for the Dolphins, looked like he was wearing cinder blocks. At one point, Dolphin center Samson Satele snapped the ball, and it just stuck in the mud. A literal fumble before the play even started. Fans sat in the stands like statues, soaked and miserable. ESPN's Mike Tirico tried his best to sound excited, but by the third quarter, the announcers were mostly making jokes about which player would fall next. Cameras kept zooming in on cleats stuck in puddles, like it was a nature documentary. The action finally reached something resembling a climax with 17 seconds left, when Jeff Reed kicked a 24-yard field goal to win the game. Final score, 3-0 Steelers. It was the lowest scoring Monday night game in NFL history. And here's the kicker. Literally, the field was so bad, Reed had to find a dry patch of grass just to plant his non-kicking foot. "I was aiming for mud," he said afterward. "No one wants to remember this game. Not the players, not the fans, not the broadcasters, not even the NFL. The game film is rarely aired. Highlights are almost non-existent. Even NFL Game Pass buries it behind technical issues. Why? Because this wasn't just bad football. It was anti-football. An unintentional comedy of errors played in a literal swamp. And if you think poor field conditions are frustrating, just wait until you see what happens when a game-winning catch becomes a national debate about what the word catch even means. Up next, the infamous Calvin Johnson process game, the Ghost Touchdown, 2010 Lions versus Bears. Let's rewind to week 1 of the 2010 NFL season. Optimism is high. Fans are back. Teams are rested. And in Chicago, the Bears are hosting the Detroit Lions in what should have been a standard divisional opener. But instead, this game created one of the most controversial rule debates in modern NFL history. A game remembered for one play, and the rule that ruined it. The Lions were down 19-14, but they were driving. With 30 seconds left, quarterback Shaun Hill lofted a perfect pass to Calvin Johnson in the end zone. Johnson, covered tightly by 2 defenders, leapt into the air, caught the ball clean, came down with both feet, and slammed the ball to the turf in celebration. Touchdown. Game won. Or so it seemed. The officials huddled. Then came the announcement. The receiver did not maintain possession through the process of the catch. Incomplete pass. Ford Field went silent. The Lions sideline was in shock. Calvin Johnson stood there looking around like he'd been pranked. "I caught the ball," he said later. "Everyone knows I caught the ball." And he wasn't wrong. What followed was a tidal wave of confusion. Fans, analysts, even former officials couldn't understand it. The replay clearly showed Johnson catching the ball, controlling it, and then breaking the plane. But by rule, because he didn't survive the ground, the touchdown was wiped off the board. Bears win, 19-14. Lions lose, and the NFL found itself at the center of a firestorm. The fallout lasted years. The term "process of the catch" became a meme. Every week, fans would argue about what did and didn't count. Even players didn't know anymore. Dez Bryant's overturned touchdown in 2014. Jesse James's no catch in 2017. They all trace back to this game. On forums and Twitter, the sentiment was unanimous. One fan wrote, "If that's not a catch, football is broken." And for a while, it kind of was. The league eventually changed the rule in 2018, clarifying what a completed catch means. But the damage was done. The 2010 Lions, who already had a long history of heartbreak, were robbed in plain sight. And this game, the league has never rebroadcasted. It's not in. Highlight reels, even the NFL's official recap, barely mentions the controversy. Because this wasn't just a bad rule, it was a national embarrassment. A reminder that even with slow motion and HD cameras, the NFL couldn't define its own game-winning play. And now, if you thought missed calls were bad, imagine tuning into Thursday Night Football only to watch Charlie Whitehurst versus Blake Bortles battle for absolutely nothing in front of an empty stadium. Up next, the 2014 TNF disaster that almost killed the brand. Thursday night, catastrophe, 2014 Titans vs. Dorks. Jaguars. Thursday Night Football was supposed to be a showcase. The NFL wanted a weekly spotlight for every team, a way to make even small market matchups feel important. But sometimes, that spotlight exposes just how far from primetime a game really is. And in Week 16 of 2014, we got the worst case scenario. Titans vs. Jaguars. A game so irrelevant, so visually dead, that even the stadium looked bored. On paper, this was a battle between 2 to 12 teams. On the field, it looked like two clubs already picking out draft prospects. The Titans were starting Charlie Whitehurst, a journeyman, backup best known for his flowing hair and clipboard experience. The Jaguars were rolling with rookie Blake Bortles, who led the league in rookie growing pains. The stadium in Jacksonville was half empty. The crowd was quiet, the lighting felt dim, and even the announcers struggled to stay engaged. At one point in the second quarter, NFL Network's broadcast went on a tangent about local weather because there was nothing to talk about on the field. The game was sluggish. Whitehurst dinked and dunked his way to 177 yards, most of it coming on screens. Bortles managed 115 yards, mostly due to one long run from Jordan Todman. The final score? 21-13 Jaguars. But no one remembers that. What people remember is how silent it all felt. Like a preseason game played in January. After the game, the biggest talking point wasn't the win, the stats, or the plays. It was a tweet. TNF should come with a warning label, "May cause drowsiness." And that's the problem. The NFL wants Thursday Night Football to feel big. But games like this remind you that sometimes not every team belongs in the spotlight. This one didn't. Coming up next, a game that somehow managed to be even less watchable. One where punt count greater than touchdown count, and the biggest hit came from the stands. Palooza 2018, Bills vs. Jaguars. The 2018 Bills and Jaguars were two teams with nothing to lose, and even less to show for it. Both came into Week 12, sitting near the bottom of the AFC standings. But no one expected this. A game so riddled with punts, penalties, and flat-out pettiness that it felt more like a bar fight than a football game. Let's start with the basics. The two teams combined for 20 punts, under 400 total passing yards, and just 6 third-down conversions. Blake Bortles was bad. Josh Allen, in his rookie year, wasn't much better, and the result was a rock fight, where every possession felt like a race to the sideline. But the game's lasting image wasn't a throw or a touchdown. It was Leonard Fournette, in street clothes, throwing punches in the stands after a sideline brawl. That's right, Fournette got ejected, but instead of heading to the tunnel, he tried to confront fans, and had to be restrained by security. The NFL later suspended him a game. That moment said it all. The commentary got quiet by the third quarter. You could hear the fans booing. One tweet went viral after the game. Bills-Jags was like watching a demolition derby with no cars. The Bills won 24-21, but no one celebrated. The stadium emptied fast. It was one of those games you instantly forget, unless you watched it live and now need therapy. Speaking of forgettable, the next entry features 2 playoff-caliber rosters and a final score of 10-7. That's right, we're going to the game, so boring it broke Sunday Night Football. The 10-7 masterpiece. 2022 Broncos versus 49ers. Let's talk about expectations. The 2022 Denver Broncos had just added Russell Wilson in a blockbuster trade. The 49ers had a loaded defense and were giving Jimmy Garoppolo another chance to lead. It was week 3. It was Sunday Night Football. And it was supposed to be great. Instead, it was one of the worst primetime games ever played. Both teams looked broken from the start. Wilson kept missing open receivers. Garoppolo ran out the back of his own end zone for a safety. Seriously, look it up. There were 17 total points, 17 punts, and more flags than first downs. The announcers, Tirico and Collinsworth, spent the second half trying not to sigh on air. The final score was 10-11 Denver, with the winning touchdown coming on a drive that only happened because Garoppolo forgot. Where the field ended. It was a game where every offensive play felt like a dare. Reddit threads labeled it the Sunday night sleepover. One fan wrote, "I watched this game and still don't know who played better." The NFL tried to brush it off, but this game exposed the ugly truth. Sometimes even playoff teams can make bad football. And when they do it in prime time, there's nowhere to hide. Coming up, a game where a coaching staff actively tried to lose. Yes, really. Let's talk about the 2020 Jets and the blitz heard round the world. The Tank Bowl, 2020 Jets versus Raiders. The 2020 Jets were 0-11. Fans were rooting for losses. The Raiders were clinging to wild card hopes. What should have been a blowout turned into one of the most shocking finishes in league history. Not because of greatness, but because of sabotage. With 13 seconds left, up 28-24, the Jets just had to keep the Raiders out of the end zone. Instead, they called a cover zero blitz, an all-out attack that left rookie corner Lamar Jackson, no relation, one-on-one against Henry Ruggs, one of the fastest players in the league. Derek Carr saw it immediately. He lofted a pass deep. Ruggs smoked the coverage. Touchdown. Game over. Twitter exploded. Analysts were furious. "It's the dumbest call I've ever seen," said Dan Orlovsky on ESPN. The very next day, DC Greg Williams was fired. Head coach Adam Gase claimed he didn't know the play call. Jets fans didn't even know how to feel. They wanted Trevor Lawrence, but not like this. One comment said, "We didn't lose. We were sacrificed." The NFL hates this game because it made tanking feel real. Not philosophical, not abstract, real. It showed a team might throw a game and do it badly. And finally, to round this group out, let's head back to the NFC East, where a pair of terrible teams played for first place and delivered exactly the disaster we feared. NFC Least, 2020 Eagles versus Giants. The 2020 NFC East was a punchline. By week 10, not a single team had a winning record. But somehow, the winner of Eagles versus Giants would take over the division. You'd think that kind of stakes would bring out the best in teams? Instead, we got this. The Giants were starting Daniel Jones, who had a reputation for tripping over himself, literally. The Eagles, led by a struggling Carson Wentz, had no offensive line, no healthy receivers, and no answers. The game opened with a Jones run. He outran the defense, then fell untouched. Again, Meme City. There were 5 total turnovers, double-digit penalties, and constant miscommunications. Wentz missed throws by yards. Jones fumbled twice, but recovered both. It was like both teams were allergic to success. Final score? 27-17 Giants. But the numbers didn't reflect how gross it felt. Reddit threads labeled it the Toilet Bowl. One fan wrote, "This game is what happens when mediocrity becomes a playoff race. The NFL wants you to forget it because it was primetime football, with no primetime quality. Just 2 teams fumbling their way toward a losing playoff spot. The London Sleepwalk, 2019 Texans versus Jaguars." The NFL has sent games overseas for years, and most go fine. Some are even great. But in Week 9 of 2019, when the Texans faced the Jaguars in London, the league got a reminder of how bad it can look when the product falls flat in front of a global audience. This wasn't just bad. It was a snooze fest. The Jaguars were hosting their annual home game across the pond, something their Jacksonville fans already hated. Gardner Minshew II, once a cult hero, collapsed on the big stage, throwing 2 picks, fumbling twice, and looking completely lost. Meanwhile, the Texans didn't need much. Deshaun Watson managed the game, Carlos Hyde ran for 150 yards, and the defense waited for Jacksonville to self-destruct. Final score, 26-3, but it felt worse. The British crowd, loyal but confused, didn't know what to cheer for. Stadium noise was flat. The energy was dead. Even Rich Eisen started talking about London airport traffic during the 3rd quarter. That's the kind of game this was. After the game, Minshew was benched. The Jaguars collapsed to a 6-10 finish. The Texans made the playoffs, only to get blown out weeks later. The NFL hates this game, not because it was controversial, but because it was boring. And boring doesn't sell football overseas. From foggy London, we now go to a Philly snowstorm so intense you could barely see the players, let alone the scoreboard. Snowpocalypse, 2013 Eagles versus Lions, December 8th, 2013. The Eagles hosted the Lions in a game that quickly turned from cold weather football into a literal whiteout. Inches of snow piled up between snaps. Field markings vanished. Cameras froze over. And somehow, they kept playing. Early on, it was chaos. Reggie Bush slipped during warm-ups and was ruled out. Snaps were fumbled, kicks ignored. Teams went for 2 on every touchdown because extra points weren't possible in the storm. The first half was almost unwatchable, but then LeSean McCoy took over. Behind a patchwork line, McCoy ran wild, posting 217 yards and breaking the Eagles' single-game rushing record, all in heavy snow. It was part miracle, part cartoon. The Eagles won 34-20, but the game was pure visual noise. 8 fumbles, no field goals, and players literally clearing snow with their hands before lining up. It went viral, sure, but Fox's cameras couldn't track the ball, down markers vanished, and mic feeds cut out. The NFL got attention, but not the kind they wanted. It's remembered fondly by fans. But the league? They haven't scheduled another outdoor December game in Philly quite like it. From snow to fire. Next is a game that ended before it started. And possibly marked the beginning of the end for Brady's Patriots. Wild card wipeout. 2009 Patriots versus Ravens. The Patriots were the playoff standard, but in the 2009 wild card round, they got humiliated at home by the Ravens in a game that felt more like a funeral than a football game. It started with a 22-yard touchdown by Ray Rice on the first play. Then came 3 Tom Brady turnovers in the first quarter. Before fans could blink, The Patriots were down 24-0 at home in January. Brady looked lost. The defense couldn't stop Rice, who ran for 159 yards. Joe Flacco barely threw, just 4 completions the whole game. That's how dominant Baltimore was. Fans started leaving by the third quarter. The once invincible stadium was silent. Commentators were stunned. It felt like the machine had crashed. Final score, 33-14 Ravens. This game is rarely replayed. It's not in Brady montages. The NFL quietly buried it, and for good reason. It wasn't just a blowout. It was a humbling. And speaking of humbling, up next is a game where both teams look like they forgot how football works. The 2011 Rams vs. Browns, an all-time offensive failure. QB carnage, 2011 Rams vs. Browns. There's bad football, and then there's whatever this was. In Week 10 of 2011, the St. Louis Rams and Cleveland Browns met in a game so uneventful, so offensively tragic, that even the scoreboard was embarrassed. The final? 13-12 Rams. And if you remember this game, you probably watched it on accident. The quarterbacks? A.J. Feely for St. Louis and Colt McCoy for Cleveland. Between them, 0 touchdowns, 4 red zone trips, and more checkdowns than completions beyond 10 yards. The best highlight was a missed 22-yard field goal by Phil Dawson with 2 minutes left. The potential game winner dwinked wide left. There were 13 penalties, multiple dropped picks, and a combined 0 for 8 on third downs in the second half. The Browns ran 32 straight plays without a pass over 6 yards. The Rams averaged 2.9 yards per carry and still won. One Reddit user wrote, "This game set football back a decade." Another said, "They should have canceled the fourth quarter out of mercy." The NFL never mentioned it again. You can't even find a full highlight reel. This wasn't a battle. It was a silent cry for help. And if you thought that was rock bottom, just wait until Thanksgiving, because nothing prepares you for the butt fumble. The butt fumble game, 2012 Jets versus Patriots. Thanksgiving 2012. Millions tuned in to watch Jets versus Patriots, expecting maybe a decent divisional game. What they got instead was 5 minutes of football hell, starring one of the most humiliating plays in NFL history, the butt fumble. In the second quarter, Mark Sanchez faked a handoff, turned the wrong way, panicked, and sprinted straight into his own lineman's backside. He fumbled. The Patriots recovered and scored. On the next kickoff, the Jets fumbled again. Another Patriots touchdown. Then came a pick six. 3 touchdowns in 52 seconds. The stadium booed. The broadcast team was speechless. Social media exploded. ESPN's Not Top 10 voted the butt fumble #1 for 40 straight weeks. The final? 49-19, and it didn't even feel that close. The NFL winced. Sanchez's career never recovered. The Jets became a punchline. It was a nationally televised meltdown, the kind of play that lives forever in GIF form, even if the league wishes it wouldn't. And if the butt fumble was football comedy, our last entry is pure tragedy, a game where the quarterback was a practice squad wide receiver, the COVID ghost game. 2020, Broncos versus Saints. On November 29th, 2020, the Denver Broncos hosted the New Orleans Saints with no active quarterbacks. Due to COVID protocols, every quarterback on Denver's roster was ruled out. That left Kendall Hinton, a practice squad wide receiver, to start at quarterback. It went as expected. 1 for 9, 13 yards, 2 interceptions. The Broncos ran a wildcat offense, threw only 1 pass in the second half, and lost 31-3. Hinton became a fan favorite for even trying, but the game itself was unwatchable. The league nearly postponed it, then said, "Play anyway." Coaches were furious. Players felt used. And fans? They watched the scrimmage with NFL branding. The NFL has never mentioned it again, for good reason. It wasn't football. It was a pandemic footnote. 16 games, all unforgettable for the wrong reasons. Whether it was chaos boredom, or pure disaster, these matchups left a mark the NFL would rather erase. If you enjoyed the breakdown, hit like, subscribe, and drop the game you think the league wants to forget. Thanks for watching.